Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm Amanda Weinstein.
I'm Rachel Vindman.
I'm Jasmine Clark.
And you're listening to the Suburban Women Problem. This week, we have an exciting announcement to share with you. The Suburban Women Problem just launched a Substack. Our guest today is also a very popular Substack. Erin Reed is a journalist and a transgender rights activist, and I can't wait to talk to her.
Hi, how's it going?
So on last week's pod, we talked about Ohio Governor Mike DeWine's veto of a bill that would restrict gender-affirming care. Jasmine was skeptical of his motives, and it turns out she was right, because then he announced an executive order that was even more restrictive. And it doesn't just target trans youth, it targets adults too. Could you walk us through what is going on in Ohio?
Absolutely. So Ohio has been trying to pass a gender-affirming care ban for trans youth for about 2.5 years now. The person that was fronting the bill was Representative Gary Click. His time, whenever he's not a representative, is a pastor who basically runs conversion therapy type operations. He's actually admitted it in one of his podcasts. And so we've seen him attempt to introduce this bill multiple times. It wasn't until this year that he actually got it through to the finish line. After he got it through, it would basically ban gender-affirming care. So that's puberty blockers, hormone therapy, and more for trans youth that's under 18. It was vetoed by DeWine. And many people, applauded DeWine for vetoing an anti-trans bill. He was one of the only Republican governors to do so. But in announcing his veto, DeWine announced that instead he would start cracking down on various types of clinics that not only serve trans youth, but also serve trans adults. And the steps that he announced would probably be very intimately familiar to people from a very different but related fight, and that's the abortion fight. So, for instance, many people will remember how in order to ban abortion in places where they didn't do outright bans, they would mandate that hallways be 12 to 14 feet wide instead of 10 feet wide. They would make it so that you can only have an abortion clinic within 5 miles of a hospital, and you had to have certain numbers of specialists and more. And so the end result was that most of the clinics shut down. And DeWine's restrictions that he announced in the vetoing of the trans youth care ban were essentially mirror images of that. Things like you had to have a bioethicist on staff to sign off on care. And I don't know about you, but I don't know the last time I ever needed a bioethicist for any of my care. But in this particular case, that's what this provision would do. The veto was then overridden, so the youth care ban is still in place now. And on top of it, the adult care restrictions are still going forward.
This is insanity. And I really hate it to be that voice of skepticism, but it's just kind of in my nature to be a voice of skepticism. And when I was doubting him last week, it was because I said, I've seen his track record on abortion care. And so his words don't match with what he's done with, the right for women to make decisions about their bodies. I wanted it to be true, but I was skeptical. And so, I think it's important for people to kind of really understand what we're talking about when we're talking about gender affirming care, because a lot of people, they're very unfamiliar, with these types of terms, or they don't exactly know what we're talking about. And so a lot of people don't understand that gender affirming care can be as simple as getting a haircut that better represents your gender.
So under the age of 12, gender affirming care is often, or is only, a haircut, pronouns, a name change, allowing the kid to express themselves however they want to express themselves. I have had parents come up to me and ask, I've got a 7 or 8-year-old that says that they're a girl and I don't know what to do. And what I say to them is, don't do anything. Let them be themselves. That's all you have to do. You just allow the kid to express themselves and to grow into the kid and the person that they're designed and they're growing up to be. Whenever they reach the age of 12 is whenever they might be offered for the very first time any sort of medical intervention. And that's just to delay puberty by a couple of years. It says that this will allow them a little bit more time to go through until they're around 13 or 14. It will allow doctors, care teams, therapists, and more to work with that family and that youth to determine if a medical transition is best for them. If they determine that it's not, the puberty blockers are fully reversible. You can start up puberty just as you were whenever you stopped. These blockers are used in kids with precocious puberty. They're used in kids that are short of stature. They're used for many more instances than just trans youth. I will note that they are only banned for trans youth. They're not banned for cis youth using them for any of these other purposes. Then once they reach the age of 14 to 15, they may start to take hormone therapy or they may not. And that's going to be up to the family, the care team, and the doctors. The most important thing to note is that these decisions are done with huge care teams and they're done over a long period of time. I think that one of the things we often hear is that kids are being rushed into medical decisions or something along those lines. And that just doesn't bear out to reality. Every single parent that I speak to talks about long wait times, wait lists, and then extensive therapy evaluations. In fact, most of the families that I speak to have folders full of papers so that whenever they get questioned by somebody, by a legal person or by another parent or a school, they can show that they've done their due diligence, that they have hundreds of papers of all of the different specialists that they've visited. Ultimately, if medical transition ends up being the right case for a trans teen, it works. We've seen that it reduces suicidality by 73%. We've seen that it reduces depression and anxiety tremendously. And as a trans adult who did not get to go through youth gender transition, I can say that by not doing that, by not allowing it, you do set that person up for surgeries down the line. You set that person up for extensive hair removal appointments and more. It can be tremendously damaging to a trans youth to be forced to go through a puberty that doesn't match their gender.
I think this is so logical that it's so logical to think that no one is being rushed into anything. And again, this just goes back to like what people are told and they just so easily believe because they don't understand it versus just sit and think about it for a second. It is not no one is being pushed to do anything. That's really not how any sector of our medical care works. So, and it's certainly not anything that deals with on the behavioral and mental health spectrum. So it is really a choice to believe misinformation from many, many people, but being armed with facts is helpful. I want to get to just last week in West Virginia, a bill was introduced, and I know you cover all these bills, and you're like all over the place. So you mentioned you're very busy with all the bills right now. But a bill was introduced in West Virginia that would make a total ban on gender reaffirming for anyone under the age of 21, and would require therapists and social workers to try to cure someone from being transgender. Can you explain why that rhetoric is so dangerous? I mean, you touched on it, but
what's wrong with people? Yeah, I'm sorry.
No. It's a wild bill, and I mean, that's the reaction that I hope people have whenever they hear about this. Because having tracked these bills, I've watched well over 1,000 hours of hearings at this point. I've been doing this for a few years now, and I have watched the arguments continue to shift. At first it was trans athletes in a very few specific sports. Then it becomes trans youth care. Then it becomes trans adults up to the age of 21. I now hear in hearings people say things like, the brain is not finished developing until the age of 26, so we should actually ban up to the age of 26. And then, of course, we are starting to hear people advocate for care bans entirety, like all gender affirming care. And again, not to belabor the point, but to compare it to another segment of activism, we think about the abortion fight and the gestational age bans and how they continued to come down and down and down until we saw Roe fall due to the Dobbs decision. And we're seeing very similar escalation of attacks against trans people in this way. That West Virginia bill not only would ban gender affirming care up until the age of 21 years old, it would also mandate that all therapists in the state not continue the delusion of being trans. So basically all therapists would have to practice conversion therapy by just using a trans person's name or pronouns. The state will tell that therapist that you are continuing a delusion and that trans people should actually be essentially forced to go back to their cisgender assigned sex at birth.
So basically they're trying to say that trans people don't exist.
Exactly. And they're trying to make it so through legislation.
If continuing a delusion was illegal in this country, I think most of the Republicans could no longer be in office. They would all be in jail if continuing a delusion was illegal. So we were talking earlier about how important representation is. And there was a trans woman who was recently disqualified from running for the Ohio State Legislature because she failed to disclose her former name. most people wouldn't even know that's a requirement. So, what are your thoughts? What are some other ways that trans people experience barriers in politics?
Yeah, so you're probably going to continue to hear this in the news from Ohio. In Ohio, there was a trans woman who was disqualified from running for office because she didn't list her former name. There's an obscure law in Ohio that says on the petition you have to list your former name. It does not apply to people who change their names for reasons of marriage or for a few
I was
other
just about to
reasons.
say, what?
And
I was just
Yeah, I
wondering that
was I
too.
was wondering the same thing. Yeah.
completely unequally applied. And in fact, it's such a non-used law that the entire 34-page manual for how to file your petition given by the Secretary of State of Ohio doesn't list it anywhere. The petition itself does not have a spot to put it. The little name box is like this tiny, and there's no other place to put your former name. And so this isn't something that basically has ever been used. But for some reason, whenever a trans person filed their candidacy, somebody remembered this old law from a few decades ago. Ultimately, this is just about disqualifying trans candidates. There are 3 other trans candidates in the state of Ohio. From what we have heard, their candidacies are already also being challenged. And so we may end up with no trans candidates able to run in the state of Ohio because of this old law. I think that the GOP is caught up in a fire. They're just caught up in this rage against LGBTQ people, and it's something that is not, we think about like, why is this happening now? And I want to stress that this is actually not just happening now. Like, this is part of a story in American history that goes back, that we're paying attention to now, thank God. You go back to the early 2000s and it was the gay marriage amendments. You go back to the 1980s and people had to yell for AIDS and HIV research. You go back to the 60s and Stonewall, even the 40s and the 30s. If you go and look at what happened in the rise of fascism in Germany, the very first books that were burned, the very famous picture of people throwing books into a fire that you all saw in your history books, those books were of the Institute of Sexology, which was the first 30 years in trans research. And so this is something that has been around for a long time. And for whatever reason, LGBTQ people tend to be that group that gets targeted every time the conservatives are looking for some group that people don't understand, so they want to demonize for political points. And I think it's for political points, and they're not winning in their general elections off this issue, but that's not what they're fighting for. They're fighting for control of their party. They're winning in the primaries because of it, and they know that they've got the backing of people like Matt Walsh and Charlie Kirk and lots of money. And I want to stress that too, because right now we know that, for instance, people are for responsible gun reform. That's like, you see that hold to 80 or 90%. But Republicans still run against that because they know that they're getting so much support from the NRA. And the Alliance Defending Freedom is a formidable force.
Here's what I heard from
Absolutely.
that. We have to yell all the time. We have to yell. I feel like, especially for all the other women out there, like, especially for the moms, like, we can yell, ladies. We know how to yell. We have to do it occasionally, right?
Yeah.
We're like, it's time to get on the bus, get your butt out the door. Like, we can yell. So we have to yell. And we often focus on a lot of the terrible news. And as you pointed out, there's a lot of terrible news and a lot of terrible bills out there. And the attacks on trans people get discussed a lot, thankfully now, as it was, as you mentioned, ignored in the past. But trans joy doesn't get as much airtime. Your own joy made the news last year when your girlfriend, as you discussed, Montana State Rep Zoe Zephyr, proposed to you. What's it been like experiencing that in the public eye?
And congratulations.
Thank you. I love her, and she's amazing. We wake up every morning and see each other and get to talk about how important it is that we get to be in this fight together, but also how important it is that we get to share our joy together. And we hear that all the time from people that see us and that take inspiration from that. And I think that, joy is important. It is important to share joy. It's important to share that, you know, that we exist and that our existence is happy. There's a reason why we do this. Like, trans people don't just transition because we want to be an oppressed class or something like that. Like, nobody would ask for to be targeted by every single Republican legislature in the country with 220 bills. We do this because this is who we are, and this is our best ability to express our own joy. And with her, I feel that, like, I get to do that. I get to do that on a daily basis, and I get to see, by virtue of that, other people too get to do that as well. And I don't know, we make each other extremely happy. We get to do this every day, and I'm blessed for that.
It's very rewarding work, but I know it's also very difficult. And so thank you for choosing that to share it with the entire trans community. And frankly, I mean, just coming and explaining things that I think the three of us, we're eager to understand, and our listeners as well. But there are a lot of places where we really do need someone who understands this at the level that you do to explain it to us and our listeners. And I've learned a lot in this conversation. So thank you so much for being willing to share it in addition to all the other work that you're doing.
Well, Erin, it has been so great having you on the pod today. But before we let you go, we like to ask our guests some fun rapid fire questions. Are you ready?
Let's go.
All right. So you and Zoe Zephyr are one of our favorite power couples. So I'd love to know who's one of your favorite power couples.
Ooh, that's a hard one. I will say that for me, it's the people. It's the people that are. I don't really think about like celebrity power couples very often. For me, I think about like the local couples that are in our community. So like Jake and Sadie, friends of mine here. I think about people in Missoula. Like these are the people that give me hope. The people that are out there in front.
I love that. We don't often hear we hear a lot about celebrities. We don't hear as much as like the power couples in all of our lives who are out there working together to make change. Love that.
Absolutely. All right, Erin, my turn. So, what is your favorite way to spend a Saturday?
Favorite way to spend a Saturday actually is happening right now. It's not Saturday, but it is a day off school because it's MLK Day. And right now it is snowing outside. We don't get snow here in the DC area very often. I'm going to be taking my kid out and we're going to go sledding. We're going to run around. It's going to be wonderful.
Yay.
All my DC friends are excited, and I'm just enjoying that I don't have to deal with it. Well, what are you most excited about for 2024?
I think for 2024, I am seeing a groundswell of support for LGBTQ people around youth. And I think that if anything is going to change, it's going to come from the youth in our community. Last year, we saw the most, like the biggest youth movement in for trans day visibility, and I'm ready to see that again.
Oh, it's coming. I'm seeing it here in Georgia. And when I say these youth are locked in, so I'm excited about it too.
Absolutely.
All right. So, last question. Where can people go to learn more about you and your work?
Of course. So erininthemorning.com is where I cover all of these bills and all the biggest cultural moments. So you can read my work there, as well as Erin in the Morn on TikTok and Twitter. Videos, if you're not much of a reader, but you want to watch videos, 1 minute, 2 minute videos that summarize everything. I also talk about all the bills there as well.
Oh, that's awesome. Wait, are you a morning person? Is that hence Erin in the Morning?
Yeah, kind of. So yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Also, I'm on Instagram, same thing, Erin in the Morning. You can see the videos there as well.
Awesome. Erin, thank you
Love
so
it.
much for joining us today.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me on.
And thank you for all you're
Of
doing.
course. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you.